7 days. That's all the doctors gave her. 7 days to live. 7 days for a millionaire father to watch his only daughter slip away, powerless against the ticking clock. The hospital's cold corridors echoed with whispers of despair. Machines hummed, charts filled with grim numbers, and every white coat that passed by carried the same message. Nothing more can be done. For all his wealth, for all his power, the millionaire could not buy more time. He stood in silence at her bedside, watching her frail body fight for each breath, haunted by the reality that his empire meant nothing if he could not save the one thing that truly mattered. Specialists flew in from across the globe. Experts studied her case with furrowed brows, scribbling notes, debating, arguing, but every conclusion ended in defeat. 7 days, they repeated, as if saying it enough would make it easier to accept. But for a father, those words were daggers. The man who once commanded boardrooms and crushed rivals now found himself trembling, begging for a miracle. Yet no miracle came. And in the shadows, unseen by the world, stood a man no one noticed. A janitor, a black man in worn overalls, pushing his mop across the same hospital floors where billionaires walked. To most, he was invisible. Just another worker doing his job. But what they didn't know was that within him lived knowledge, resilience, and a heart unwilling to watch a child fade away. He had listened to the doctors. He had watched their panic. He had studied the machines as he quietly moved between rooms. And when others gave up, something in his eyes burned brighter. While the experts spoke of endings, he saw possibility. While the wealthy turned to despair, he carried hope. The millionaire father barely noticed him at first. Why would he? In a room filled with the world's sharpest minds, why would anyone look at a janitor? Yet fate has a way of choosing the unlikeliest heroes. And as the days bled away, it was this man, this overlooked worker, who would rise where all others had fallen. Every night, he whispered to himself, replaying the lessons life had taught him. Struggles, hardships, trials that had carved wisdom into his soul. And when he finally stepped forward, when he finally dared to speak, his words cut through the silence like thunder. "She doesn't have 7 days," he said. "She has as long as we fight for her." At first there was laughter. At first there was doubt. The doctors scoffed. The executives in their suits shook their heads. But when he touched the machines, when he adjusted what no one else dared to question, something shifted. The rhythm changed. The girl's breathing steadied. The alarms slowed their scream. The millionaire stared, disbelief flooding his eyes. Could it be? Was the man the world? Ignored the one who scrubbed floors, doing what the finest experts could not. He rushed to his daughter's side, watching color return to her cheeks, life flickering where death had already claimed victory. 7 days became one moment, one miracle, one truth that silenced every doubt. The girl who was supposed to die opened her eyes. She was cured. And in that instant, the room of power and despair fell quiet, as all eyes turned toward the janitor. The moment her eyes fluttered open, the hospital froze. For hours, the machines had declared defeat. The experts had surrendered, and the whispers of death filled the halls. But now, against every prediction, against every law of medicine, the girl who was supposed to fade within 7 days was awake, breathing, alive. The millionaire father stumbled backward, his hands shaking as tears blurred his vision. For the first time in years, the man who ruled empires felt small, humbled by something money could never buy. He reached for his daughter's hand, gripping it as if it might vanish if he let go. And then his gaze fell upon the one person no one had noticed until now. The janitor. A man in faded overalls, skin glistening with sweat from hours of unseen labor, hands scarred from a lifetime of hard work. To everyone else, he had always been invisible, blending into the corners of rooms, pushing his mop in silence. But now he stood in the center of the storm, the quiet hero who had done what billionaires and doctors could not. The specialists rushed back, disbelief painted across their faces. They examined the monitors, rechecked the girl's vitals, compared every number, but the result was undeniable. She wasn't slipping away, she was stabilizing. The charts that once predicted doom now told a story of recovery. Still, none of them could explain how. None, except the man they had ignored. "Impossible," one of the doctors muttered, shaking his head. "This shouldn't be happening." But the janitor didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the girl, steady, calm, carrying a kind of wisdom that no textbook could teach. He hadn't needed titles or degrees. He had carried knowledge forged in struggle, sharpened in silence, and wrapped in a heart that refused to give up. The millionaire approached him slowly. His pride broken, his arrogance melted into gratitude. "Who are you?" he whispered, his voice trembling. The janitor didn't boast. He didn't smile in triumph. He simply lowered his gaze and replied softly, "A father, just like you." The words struck harder than any thunder. For in that moment, the millionaire understood. The janitor had seen his daughter not as a patient, not as a puzzle, but as a child worth fighting for, as a life worth saving. And word spread quickly. Reporters gathered outside, hungry for the story. Executives whispered in disbelief. Staff who had once walked past the janitor without a glance now stared with awe. The man they ignored was now the man the world wanted to know. But he didn't care for cameras or applause. He didn't seek recognition or wealth. His eyes stayed on the little girl, smiling faintly as he saw her chest rise and fall with newfound strength. To him, this wasn't about proving himself. It was about proving that no one is ever too small to make a difference. For the millionaire, the lesson was devastating yet beautiful. All his wealth, all his influence, had crumbled before a truth too powerful to deny. Greatness does not always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears overalls, sometimes it carries a mop, and sometimes it saves the world without ever asking for anything in return. Tears streamed down the father's face as he sank to his knees before the janitor, whispering, "You saved her." "You saved me?" The janitor placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and steady. "No," he said quietly. "Love saved her. And love is something no man can buy." The room fell silent again, not with despair this time, but with reverence. Because everyone knew they had witnessed not just a miracle, but a revelation. The world outside the hospital had already begun to change. News anchors called it a miracle. Cameras flashed like lightning through the glass windows, and whispers spread faster than wildfire. But inside that room, where the air still carried the scent of fear, now turned into hope. Only one thing mattered. The little girl was alive. The millionaire father sat at her bedside, clutching her small hand as if it were the only treasure he had left. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his face streaked with tears, but none of it mattered. His empire, his fortune, his power, all of it was meaningless, compared to the faint but steady heartbeat echoing on the monitor. And standing quietly at the edge of the room was the janitor, a man of 42, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark brown skin and scarred hands that spoke of endless years of labor. His overalls were worn, his shoes faded, his posture humble. To most, he was invisible. Yet tonight, he was the pillar that held the impossible in place. Doctors lingered in the background, still stunned, their decades of training humbled by the janitor's clarity. Executives who had once walked past him without a glance now struggled to meet his eyes. Even the guards outside the door, men who prided themselves on discipline, stood straighter when he passed. The millionaire rose slowly, his daughter's fragile breathing steady behind him. He crossed the room, each step heavier than the last, until he stood face to face with the man he had once never noticed. And then, before anyone could comprehend it, he did something no one had ever seen. He bowed. The gasp in the room was deafening. A man of unimaginable wealth, power, and prestige, lowering himself before the janitor. His voice cracked as he whispered, "I spent my life believing money could buy everything. But tonight, you showed me I was wrong. You gave me back my daughter. You gave me back my soul." The janitor shook his head gently, his deep voice calm. "I didn't do it for thanks. I didn't do it for glory. I did it because no life should be ignored. Not hers, not mine. Not anyone's." For the first time in his life, the millionaire understood what true wealth was. It wasn't measured in towers, cars, or accounts. It was measured in love, sacrifice, and the courage to act when others give up. Word of the miracle spread beyond the hospital walls. The story of the janitor, who had saved a millionaire's daughter in her final 7 days, was told in classrooms, on television screens, and in boardrooms across the world. People who had once overlooked the ordinary began to question what greatness really looked like. And in every version of the tale, one truth remained. Brilliance and compassion could rise from the most unexpected places. The janitor returned to his work, Mop in hand, overalls still faded, shoes still worn, but now, wherever he walked, eyes followed with quiet respect. Some whispered his name like a legend. Others bowed their heads when he passed, but he paid it no mind. Because for him, the greatest reward wasn't the applause or the headlines. It was the sight of a little girl running again one day, laughing in the sunlight, alive because he refused to let the world decide her fate. And the millionaire? He never forgot. He built scholarships in the janitor's name, hospitals that carried his story, and a promise etched into his heart. Never again would he judge a man by his uniform. That night, the world had been reminded of something timeless, that miracles are not born in wealth or power. They are born in courage. They are born in love. And sometimes, they are born in the hands of those we least expect.